Hello, hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today on Friday afternoon. I see some familiar faces here, and we are waiting for Rebecca to pop back on, who is our actually guest speaker. Rebecca is just changing her internet and coming back on. So while she gets back here with us, we will get started. Uh, this is our second seminar in our series of ease of research seminars, which we started just this year. This is a new initiative of our Office of Research for the Department of Medicine. I think a lot of you know me. I'm Vibha Lama. I'm the Vice Chair for Research, and I'm helped here in my role by Dr. Charlie Searles, who is the Associate Vice Chair of Research, and Sarah McKeelan, who is assistant who has been now in faculty affairs, but was our program manager. So the goal of our Ease of Research series was to increase our ability of our investigators to be able to focus on their research by making it easier around them, things which are around them, the research administration, and also to act as a conduit between this wonderful work being done around us by research administration and bringing it to our investigators and making this link between the two. So we heard from Dr. Robert Nobles, who is the Vice President of Office of Research for Emory University. And today I have the pleasure of introducing Rebecca Rousselle. Rebecca is the Assistant Vice President for Human Research Protection Program, which we all know as IRB. In this role, she works to lead an administrative staff and supports approximately 100 committee members. So there's a large amount of work to be done in achieving the IRB's mission, which is to facilitate ethical human research. Her work obviously involves collaboration with other research administrations on projects which are aimed at improving service for investigators. And we are very thankful for this office of IRB, because of which we are able to carry on this very important human clinical trial and other translational research work. Sarah, do you see Rebecca online?
She has not rejoined us.
Okay, so Rebecca, it seems like was having some internet trouble and was joining again. We were actually going to do this in person, but then since this is the format most of the people signed up for, we ended up doing this format. So while we wait for Rebecca, let me open up to the audience and ask them, is there any other specific office or any other area which will be good for us to host? We have a series of seminars, and Sarah, I don't know if you can display that. You probably don't have it somewhere close, but we have IACUC, we have um, Office of Clinical Research, OCR. They are already scheduled. What else do we have scheduled, Sarah, for our conferences? Do you remember?
Let me pull up. I can drop the link to our Ease of Research Town Hall webpage in the chat.
Lovely,
So
thank
we
you.
have in November, we have Office of Sponsored Programs with Holly Summers. December, we'll be meeting with IACOC and Compliance and Regulatory Affairs Office. So that's going to be for the rest of the fall. And then we're working on setting up some for the beginning of 2025 in the winter.
Oh, I see. Model is, am I saying it right? Your name?
Modeling.
Modele. Modele. Yes. Hi, welcome. So you were
Hi.
saying having CTSA will be a good one.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people, except you have like a clinical trial and you use CTSA services, people don't really know how CTSA can help facilitate research, especially like junior investigators. There are a lot of like research capabilities as well as assistance, like their data support. They also have like funding for I think like I don't know if they still have this, but they have like a $5,000 fund that junior investigators can
Yes. Yes.
use. They have research coordinators um capabilities. So I think that there are a lot of resources in CTSA, and honestly, the website is not easy to navigate even for me as a senior
Right.
person. So I think having someone from each of the, or someone come from CTSA come talk. The other thing that we struggle with is statistical support. I know that the Department of Medicine has like some data and statistical,
Yes.
I've used that a couple of times. Honestly, I haven't found that helpful. I know CTSA also has that. So I think, in my opinion, I think that, and I'm based at Grady, is that I think that to support other research that is not necessarily NIH funded, but more of like local databases like Emory and maybe Grady, that part of offering some kind of
Right.
statistical support, data analysis
Thank you.
would
Yes,
really be
absolutely.
helpful.
So thank you so much. I love this idea. We will plan CTSA because I would like to learn more about our Emory CTSA as well. I think we have Rebecca online. Am I right, Sarah? I saw her pop up.
I am here. I just am on my phone temporarily to let you know that
Okay,
things gone quite amiss with my
that's
Wi-Fi,
okay.
unfortunately.
So Rebecca, are you able to show your presentation?
Not from my phone, but I can email it really quickly. Well, no, I can't email it very quickly to Sarah, but I can see it on my screen, hopefully, and then I could talk through it at least. And while I try to continue to
Okay,
get online here, I don't know what's
okay.
I have, as I was telling Viva, I have two different internet routers right now in my home, the AT&T and Xfinity, because I was switching over and both are still active and neither of them will let me connect right now. And I don't know why. Um,
Always happens when you have to give a talk. So, oh, Rebecca, while you do that, it's okay. We had very good discussion. We will add CTSA to this group. Anybody else has any suggestions, please drop it in the chat.
okay.
And we can start off, Rebecca, by you describing us at least, because I think the group here is probably very aware of IRB and some of the slides which you're going to have in there.
Mhm.
But if you want to start off with something or maybe some of the new initiatives or whatever, howsoever you want to start, please go ahead and get started.
Okay. Um, sure. And I know that Department of Medicine is obviously very clinically focused, but okay, that's fine. But I have a very top of mind the fact that Emory is the IRB for the whole university and including the social behavioral side and behavioral research, whether that's from the School of Nursing, School of Public Health, the Department of Medicine, and some of their educational initiatives. So I was going to start out by just saying, recapping that we are the IRB for the entire university. We have two separate IRB committees, one social behavioral and one biomedical, but
Okay.
one staff that serves them all. And so we do have a lot of expertise on our staff across the span of research, and we all of our staff currently handle all of it, and we're not just distributed or grouped by department or school or anything like that. And there's pros and cons to that. So that's one thing that we've discussed with some faculty and our leadership about how to best organize our work for efficiency. And to give you the kind of comfort at like the Department of Medicine that you have analysts who really are familiar with what you're doing or some consistency. But right now we do have generalists in our office who any given study will be assigned to any one of them. We also do a lot of the research reviews for the Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, as you know, probably, that are run by Emory faculty. Lots of research at Grady, lots of collaborations with Georgia Tech, UGA, and Morehouse, and we have overarching IRB reliance agreements with all of those to streamline the collaborative research we do with them. So I had to repurpose, I didn't have to, but it's a little challenging to get data out of our system, but as of January, we had about 5,500 non-exempt active studies under local IRB review. And then a lot more that, especially clinical trials that are multi-site that go to commercial IRBs. And we do the local administrative review for those. Around 700 of our studies at that time were deemed greater than minimal risk, whether initially or just at the stage they hadn't gone into data analysis only, for example. About 800 clinical trials involving drugs or devices, and many more in addition to that are reviewed by those commercial IRBs. We're the VA, also the IRB for the VA. There's like 250 VA studies active in our system. We have a large number of pediatric studies, over 900 of them. We have a very similar ratio of social behavioral, or equal ratio of social behavioral to biomedical studies in our review, about 1 social behavioral to 1.3 biomedical. And then at that time, we had 11 multi-site studies where we started serving as the single IRB of record that are like enrolling at multiple sites. And that's a new initiative or new service that we're providing as of last year. So let me just check my internet. I think I might have internet now, so I'm going to try to join the Zoom.
Lovely. And when you do come on, Rebecca, we want to hear about this IRB of record, because I know
Okay.
Emory was not doing that before, and I'm sure a lot of our investigators are interested in that.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear
Yay.
you.
See my beautiful face?
We can see you.
Well, there's my
Here
background.
you are. Excellent. All right. Do you want to start sharing?
Sure. I know then I have to just deal with that weird Zoom sharing of the PowerPoint situation where it ends up looking funny for a second until I figure it out. Yeah, so I was going to go next. I do have a couple slides on single IRB review.
Okay,
for
wonderful. Go the way you want to go, Rebecca, but please do leave some time for questions in the end.
Oh my gosh, yes. You know, I
You've
definitely
been extremely patient and we
town
want
hall for a reason, yes. All right, so I know that I'm going to try to just do you see an actual slide? Great, that worked marvelously. So our priorities for supporting research at Emory are communication, of which this is a part, and I really appreciate being invited to such a great event. So we do, in case you weren't aware, we do monthly webinars that we announce through our email list, email newsletters, and the ORA newsletter. We also do things like this, the department presentations. We have a ton of information on our website, and we do keep it really up to date. So as much as you want to get an answer right away from a person, there is a lot of information on there for those who are willing to find it, and we welcome feedback on how to organize it in any better way so that you can find things more easily. But what we always point people to is we have this thing called a page level help for ERB submissions. And that goes through every question in our whole smart form and gives you guidance on each one. So if you want to create a submission that has the best chance of getting through a streamlined review with the IRB, that's the place to go. Along with using our most up-to-date templates, always. I'm going to hide my video so that I have more bandwidth. Okay. We also, of course, do post-approval monitoring of studies with our QA team so that you can minimize non-compliance and make sure that we're catching things before the feds are catching them. We do have those new single IRB services, which is very important to faculty, we know. We're always doing continuous quality improvement, as I said, of guidance on our website, of our templates, and even our ERB system. It's been very challenging, impossible almost, to make any updates to our current system. But I'll talk later. I'll talk very shortly about the new system that we're all going to be moving into and the opportunities for improvement with that. We are also trying to fill holes in our IRB member expertise. You might have seen the plea for members in our latest newsletters because we have had some attrition, and we find that sometimes studies need to get bumped to a later week or a later month because we can't get anyone to review, for example, the cardiology study on that agenda or pulmonology or things. And we have to bring in consultants from outside the IRB. And we're having really good response to those requests for members. So I'm thrilled. And then, of course, we are trying to reduce our turnaround times, especially for less complex or better quality submissions. So I hope that we could make it clear to folks why some submissions take quite a bit of time to review and a lot of back and forth, and there's various reasons for that. But what we don't like, and what no one likes, is that a lot of those complicated submissions make it also very slow to get, sometimes slower than it should be, to get simple, straightforward modifications or exempt studies, for example, to go through. I will say that a lot of times exempt studies take a long time because they are also tricky to review and to even determine if they're exempt or not, which is why we want to work with researchers to improve the quality of submissions in any way we can, by education, by better resources, by more of these conversations, etc. So some of the improvements we've made up until now in like the last year or two, we did just do a major revision of our protocol and consent templates, which you hopefully heard about. We did a webinar about it recently. So, we're always trying to make things better and more foolproof. And the way we did that this time is to make a lot more kind of checkboxes and tables so that you don't have to write free text and have us nitpick it and send it back because that word didn't match a word in some other part of the submission. We just say exactly what we need to know on these tables, and then you check boxes. And then potentially add some text to go with your specific study. We also put in a whole larger section to get at artificial intelligence and machine learning studies, which are blossoming at a great rate here at Emory. And we made some updates to our data safety monitoring plan guidelines and requirements that hopefully make it more streamlined because there's fewer categories of studies now. And we've allowed certain lower risk, like device studies and stuff, to use a more simple, less robust data safety monitoring plan, kind of trying to right size it and learn from experience. And our consent template no longer refers that to a modular document for the various kinds of things that might apply only to certain studies. Everything is really in line, and you just delete whatever is not applicable to your study. And we heard good feedback from coordinators and stuff before we launched that consent template that they preferred that format. We also simplified our cost option. One of the things you might have noticed waiting for when you're submitting a study that's an interventional study is that we were waiting on a cost option designation from OCR as they're doing the prospective reimbursement analysis, i.e. determining what can be billed to insurance and what can be billed to the participant for the study. So we just decided to default to option 2, for example, and then not wait on OCR so that there wouldn't be that bottleneck. And then on the off chance, a very rare chance that OCR comes up with a different option, then they would let us know and we would do a modification. Injury language improvements were needed because I don't know if any of you have experienced this, but lawyers for sponsors like to really nitpick anything related to their liability. So we've tried so many iterations of injury language that will work for all sponsors, and we need to do that because we have such a large volume, and having to negotiate language with every sponsor takes an immense amount of time and slows everyone down. So we have Donald Harvey on this case, as well as OSP, to try to get everyone to create a united front on insisting on our language, not letting anyone change it, unless the sponsor just says, finally, we won't do the study unless you change the language. So we're hoping to cause fewer delays to research and startup with those changes. We also work a lot with Grady ROC. We have monthly meetings with them. And we have, I think, bi-weekly meetings with OIT, because you might have experienced some longer startup times when the Grady ROC is reviewing a study. And they're a great group, but I've found ways to maybe let them see studies a little earlier in the process and address issues with them. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to go forward. With OIT, there was a lot of delays a few years ago, and we meet with them to just advocate for specific studies to get through their process. This is for security review of software used in studies, but also to advocate just for kind of like more rational rules as it applies to research use of software. And they have been great about it too. And I think that though change takes time, and so us being able to push on it every couple of weeks has been helpful. We also launched a new international research webpage, recognizing our old information was not as user-friendly as it could be and more outdated. One of the things that we've found new delays for international studies, which are already challenging because of the need for multiple ethics committee reviews, cultural context, input, et cetera, is the plethora of new international privacy laws. So if you want, we need to get the word out that if anyone's planning a study, even as simple as an online survey in China, for example, it could end up needing outside legal review from Office of Ethics and Compliance and OGC because of how, if you are in violation of the PIPL rule up in China, for example, it can come with criminal liability. And so no one wants to take the chance of having criminal liability in an international court. if we don't get it right. And that really can be as for something as simple as a benign online survey. They take it very seriously. So it's not only China, it's lots of other countries are coming up with different rules. So we're trying to work with Office of Ethics and Compliance and OGC to get better guidance available so that we can know which ones to pay attention to and how to address each one without having to go to them every time. We've also, continued to train and expand our reliance team a bit so that instead of having it be a 1 or 2 person shop, we now have multiple analysts who are able to process things and are learning more every day, so that can be less of a bottleneck, just because there's so many studies that now require reliance and single IRB review that the streamlining is very important, as you know. Finally, we're working with the CTSA on a MyChart recruitment pilot. So now that we have Epic and MyChart, there's a lot of interest in using MyChart to send out requests to join research studies to a larger population, kind of what we would call in the past cold calling, which we always didn't allow. So that's been going well, and hopefully in the future it will be expanded to be used for a lot more studies to help improve enrollment. Any questions on any of that? And I can't see, of course, if people are asking questions. Let me know.
I have a question, Rebecca.
Hi.
Hi, Rebecca. Thank you. First of all, a comment to say that all the improvements you shared, definitely my team has been a beneficiary of how you've made like research approval easier from the regulatory aspect, and particularly being at Grady, that has really been helpful. But my question is about the MyChart recruitment pilot and plans to extend it to Grady. I think because Grady is on Epic as well, has been on Epic prior to Emory. And also, I know a couple of things, that I think I'll let you answer that and something related. Thanks.
Yeah, no, I don't know that whether obviously the Grady is part of the CTSA, and so I don't know if the Neil Dickert and Gabe Naharo have already been working through the possibility of using Grady MyChart as well. So I'll have to just go back and ask them about that and make sure that they have it on their radar. Did you have another question you said?
Rebecca, I don't see any other questions in the chat.
Okay, I thought Dr. Ogunyi was going to come back with another
Yeah,
part.
sorry. I was trying to unmute myself. The other question was regarding, I don't know if you are the right person, but there's something called PCONET, where there are a lot of like clinical trials that are available to universities. And I don't know if Emory is a site. There have been quite a number of clinical trials that have been approached, but because either Emory is not a site, we cannot participate. And I understand it has to be done at an institutional level, but I don't know if you're familiar with PCONET.
No, I know of PCORI. Is that related to PCORI?
Yes.
Yeah, I'll ask Neil about that too, since he's done a lot of PCORI related studies to see what he thinks, what he knows about it, if anything.
Thank you.
Okay. Great. All right. So the ones that are more improvements in the offing are very exciting for, I don't know what that line is for, very exciting for social behavioral researchers, especially, or people doing educational research. A streamlined exempt protocol template that's going to just kind of go through the categories of exemption. Will only let you use the template if your study is limited to the things in those categories. And then instead of having to go through the whole entire protocol template, just give a description of the study with some key points, and then we will hopefully, you still have to fill in the rest of the SMART form and ERB and skipping all the clinical research related questions, of course. And then we go through a regular review, but the protocol template won't need to use the whole entire social behavioral protocol template necessarily. And we really hope that that helps reduce the noise and reduce the delay, the length of time for reviewing these. So we'll focus on really what we need to focus on. And that's we have a clinical behavioral research task force right now that is reviewing that to give us feedback. We're trying to see if, like a couple other institutions, there's people that do a lot of research on secondary data that might come from websites posted by public health entities or other research groups, and they're used a lot, like over and over again by researchers that always have to then come to the IRB or find out, this scrutiny of whether it's really potentially re-identifiable or not. So we're hoping to come up with a list of data sets that we've already made that determination for and post it on our website so that, that if you're using data from those data sets and not asking specially for kind of the hidden data that they might offer upon request that has more identifiable information, then you don't need to submit to the IRB at all. That was a request from the school public health. And we are, again, as I was mentioning before, kind of rethinking, is there any way we can reorganize our office in a way that maintains our staff's kind of job satisfaction and lets us use their full potential, but maybe gets at triaging things a bit better and allowing more targeted review. So maybe like more of a social behavioral team like we used to have a biomedical team, or some people that rotate and just do exempt studies, or just do modifications that are very straightforward for a while. Not necessarily permanently, but another thought was to do what some institutions do and have staff assigned to specific schools or departments, which we've struggled with before because, you don't want people to go on vacation and not be able to provide the service needed to those departments. But just to know that we are continually thinking about if there's any way to do things better. Again, I mentioned already the guidance on international privacy regulations that we're hoping Tracy Dawson will provide to us soon. And the new system that we're going into. Any questions? Dr. Lama, did you come on?
Yes, there are some questions in there. I think Amy has a question and Dan has a question. Amy?
Okay.
Thank you. Hi, Rebecca.
Hi.
It's Amy Stout. Let's see. What was my question? So I am frequently overwhelmed with IRB. It's not my favorite. Is there any way, I know y'all are doing everything you can, and we have the timelines and it says, allow 2 weeks to hear something. Is there any way we can like get a message before 2 weeks just to make sure that it was received and it's not a gross problem? I will sit and wait 2 weeks and then I'll be like, what's up? And then like, oh, I didn't see it. Or I don't want to.
For new study submissions or maybe more for modifications or other types of submissions?
Sorry, what was the question?
Are you thinking of like new study submissions or more like modifications or inquiries?
Modifications.
Modifications, yeah. They should see them. I mean, there's no excuse for us to say we didn't see them, unless someone was really on vacation unexpectedly for a while and their team wasn't covering them for some reason.
Yeah, I think that's happened, that there's gaps in.
Yeah, I would say that one of the things we're trying to deal with is something that most organizations deal with, which is just somewhat uneven performance and strengths and weaknesses. So we do have a couple staff that we see more escalations from study teams of, hey, I haven't heard back from this person. I've logged comments and they haven't replied back to me, or an email and they haven't replied back. And sometimes there's good reasons for that. It's just a misunderstanding, but we are actively really hard working to make sure that people, at least so you'll be confident that they will have looked at it and are checking their inbox every day or every 2 days to see if log comments, like if you're putting in modification and you really want to know a certain question about it, all of our staff should be replying to those in a couple days and not in 2 weeks. So if you do not hear from them in 2 days, and then ideally just send them an email in case there was just a human mistake of not seeing it, and you don't hear back from them, then you can escalate it to us.
Is it 2 days or 2 weeks?
For like a log comment asking a question, we should be replying in a couple days. For a whole new submission, we give our staff up to 2 weeks to do their pre-screening, depending on their workload and their queue.
What about a mod?
So mods, what we're trying, kind of going back to what I said about figuring out better ways of triaging things, that's what's coming out of our task force as well, is there's so many different types of mods. So exactly. I think for a really complex mod that is going to change a lot of the documents in the study, And if we're having a really busy couple of weeks, then yeah, it might take a couple of weeks for them to fully pre-screen it and then send it to review or get back to you. But we would want them to be looking through and kind of prioritizing their inbox to say, these modifications, well, staff change mods should be 2 days. But the other types of ones, if it's really simple, not have it sit there for 2 weeks. Or if they see a log comment from the study team saying, we have patients coming in 3 days, we need this looked at, then they should see that log comment promptly and not even not look at it for 2 weeks. So if you find that's not happening, we know that we have a couple staff that struggle with it, and we're really trying to.
I guess there's the definition of what's a major mod and what's not. Our group. It feels like we do a lot of add a funding source.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's not a new grant, it's the same grant number, but it's treated as if maybe is there some way if it's the same NIH grant number, it just has a different EPICS number. It's a lot of work for us to do this, have it treated that way. I don't know. Maybe that's something.
No, I know. I think funding changes has to be like its own presentation or something, because it's almost never as simple as the study team thinks it's going to be. And one of the things that goes into that is you might know for sure that nothing has changed about the study, but we have so many people submitting things where they say nothing has changed. And then I go in and I take the time to scrutinize the whole grant application, if it's a renewal, for example, and there are changes. And so we can't trust, unfortunately, that. So that does take longer than you think it would take anytime there's a funding addition. But if you're as clear as possible, like I have, there is zero changes to the grant application. It is just a no-cost extension, and the EPICS number changed or something. And you can do whatever you can to expand on that to make it more confident that there's really no changes. Then I would probably get to it a lot quicker. But anything other than that is going to be more complicated. I can quickly answer Dr. Ogunyi's question. As EPIC Cosmos an exempt data set, and we are about to release guidance that says we are treating it as not human subjects. So you don't need to submit to IRB if you're going to be using EPIC Cosmos data. We worked hard with Gabe Naharo has been harassing me about that a lot, and we've gotten the right input now, and I think we're going to be launching that guidance.
Rebecca, before we go to Dr. Perrian's question about contracting, let me ask you about this thing which you were talking about, which is funding agencies. And you said it might be a very big topic for its own presentation. But one of the things which I want to get clarified, so a lot of us do translational research.
Yeah.
We might have one cohort of patients from which we are getting multiple samples, right? And some of those samples we'll use in every one of our R01s. So that R01, once it gets funded or when we're applying for it, gets added to the IRB, right? So when it gets funded, we want to add that same IRB number to that grant. But that grant doesn't have a protocol which is saying, this is how we're going to do the study. We're going to enroll 30 patients and do this, this, and this. All it's saying is, we will use the mesenchymal cells or lymphocytes from patients with asthma, lung transplant, whatever we want to say. It will be under this IRB. This is how I have done it in my previous institution. It was very easy. We would add grant numbers. Is that how it works here? Because I think it might be a little different here. Is that right?
Yeah, no, it's different. And it's challenging for us that other institutions don't do it the same way for obvious reasons. If it's a secondary use of data or specimens collected under a different research study, the default is to have a new submission using our secondary analysis template, which is a much smaller, a shorter protocol template that doesn't include lots of questions about consent or about, it will say, it presumes a waiver of consent in a lot of cases. And that needs to happen because the Emory OSP is charged with certifying to the government that IRB has approved the specific aims and methods in that R01. And if those specific aims and methods aren't already contained in the protocol for the parent study that was collecting those specimens, then you'd either have to add those specific aims and methods to that protocol as like a sub-study, but then that gets out of hand pretty quickly over time. And in the sense of the IRB not knowing like which grants are active at which times, and especially if there's different PIs for different R01s. So the cleanest and best practice way is to have a separate like a separate secondary analysis submission for that R01. There are definitely exceptions, and we have some guidance about like what those exceptions could be. Like if it's a longitudinal cohort study and you get a little supplementary funding to look at one more angle and collect a couple different things that are all part of that same general objective or study, then that could be a modification. Or a training grant, adding like one additional analysis or something because it's a mentored, junior faculty member that's really latching on to this parent study.
Like our grants, most of them are completely say it will be 80% mouse. 20% is going to talk about using a few human cells. So are you supposed to just review at all our specific aids?
Yeah, that's what we are supposed to do. Yes, is review this, not the animal ones, but just the human ones. I know.
Okay. All right. I'll have to cross that when we get there, but we'll get, maybe we'll have another discussion on that.
Yep. Yes, we should. We definitely can.
Dan, you had a
supplementary
question.
example. What?
Sorry, I was going to ask Dan Perrin if he wants to say his question.
Oh, yeah.
Are you still there?
Dan Perry, so like contracting or like OSP and the IRB will basically, if we're trying to get a study started up at Emory and the sponsor says we don't like your injury language, we want to replace this word with that word, we'd say we have a policy out there. We'd say please see this policy. We are not making changes to our injury language that is based on the contract, and it aligns with the contract. And so we are hopeful that because of how much we've massaged this injury language and made it pretty broad, sponsors will be able to say, okay, that's fine. There will, of course, still be sponsors that say we absolutely really can't do the study. And that's when it comes to like Donald Harvey potentially to make the final call and decide if Emory wants to lose the sponsor or continue to work on the study. Probably continue to work on the study. But we're just really trying to reduce the number of negotiations we have to do. And the good thing is that OSP is now going to be presenting the template consent language at the same time they're presenting the contract language. So the sponsors are going to be kind of in writing saying, okay, we're cool with both of these, the consent language and the contract language. And that will be another lever to pull to say, hey, you already agreed to this consent language, so you shouldn't be requiring changes later on. Does that make sense? I hope. Oh yeah, so I don't know if we're ready to move on to the single IRB requirement.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay. So the single IRB review is required for all federally funded multi-site studies that have more than one domestic site and that are non-exempt, I should add. So it does include SBIR and STTR grants. So those would be one where like Emory spins off a company or a company approaches Emory to do a clinical research study. And the company is getting the award from the NIH, but wants to subaward to Emory to do the work. So the company turns out to be engaged in the research just because they're the prime awardee. So we need to do a reliance for them to rely on us. So that's just something to keep in mind before you get too far ahead of yourselves for SBIR and STTR studies. Again, it's only for domestic US sites. One thing to know is that the FDA is really close to saying that they are going to also require single IRB review for multi-site FDA regulated studies. So that's going to potentially add some additional studies to this mix and require reliance where it hadn't been before. But a lot of those FDA regulated studies we were already sending to WERB or Advara or something anyway. So it's not going to make a huge impact on Emory. It'll be more for any like investigator initiated studies where they want to enroll at multiple sites. So Emory is now positioned to be the single IRB. We have SOPs and a cost model for it. So it's for multi-site studies where it's required to use a single IRB, where the Emory PI is the lead PI or the prime awardee. And of course, we'd only be doing it for US sites because that's the only time it's even required. And it's for ones right now where there's 5 or fewer participating sites that are enrolling. If there's a 6th site that's like a data coordinating center, that would be fine too. We're just more worried about how many sites need their own consent forms and stuff. and could have adverse events. So if you're applying for any new federal multi-site grant and you want Emory to serve as the SIRB, you need to talk to us way ahead of time, not the day you're submitting the grant at OSP, because we do have a cost model for it and we need to work it into the budget for the study. And we need to know whether it's going to meet our criteria for being a single IRB of record. You have to be kind of sure what number of sites you're going to have, of course, by the time you talk to us. You can't say, I think it's going to be around 3 and then decide at the end to make it 10. Because we'd have heartburn about that. Does that make sense? All right. And if we can't serve as a single IRB because there's too many sites or some other weird situation, then instead of adding our fees to the budget, you would want to get the quote we would help you get the quote from a commercial IRB. Or unless one of the other sites is maybe like one of the few institutions around who's really has a robust single IRB review process because they were funded by the CTSA in their region to do it. Vanderbilt used to do that, Johns Hopkins. Okay, if there's no questions specifically about SIRB review, I can go to one of the last other things I was going to mention, which is AI and machine learning. So just for your information, not because it's necessarily going to affect you too much right now, but the IRB has a tough time getting our heads around how to apply the regulations to these types of studies and if they really do need special considerations. Most of the considerations are really not unique to AI and it's more about big data. But to figure out the answers to our questions, we started a working group of peer institutions around the country. So we have the members to the right, we have representatives from them, from their IRBs, and we meet monthly. And we're putting together guidance documents that we'll share on an industry website, IRB industry website. And we've done some other activities related to crowdsourcing wisdom from other IRBs. So we also did a lot of stakeholder meetings here at Emory. So we met with probably some of the people from DOM, I imagine, and we're trying to have it equally cover social behavioral uses of AI as well as clinical uses. Although clinical uses tend to be the most talked about in terms of using AI in the clinical workflow. Questions of everybody, even if you're not doing AI research, you'll still just have to click NA to those questions on the protocol template or delete the section. It's just so many studies of all kinds have AI ML features nowadays. Okay, are we ready to talk quickly about the new system we're going into and what we know about it right now? We've already started the discovery process and the onboarding process and configuration process. So
Rebecca, I think people will love to hear about that because that information is just starting to flow in. Yeah.
Okay. Yep. So as you've probably heard, Insight is what Mass General Brigham developed in-house, and it's
have a different slide for that, Rebecca, because we are
I was going to kind of give a tiny bit of background before launching.
Sorry.
Insight is a system that integrates lots of different offices and system like modules into one dashboard. So as an investigator, you'd log in and you'd see action items that need your attention. And it could be from IACUC, it could be from humans, it could be from grants, et cetera. And then there's modules that you open up to kind of go deeper into those action items or to create new submissions. So it's everything in one place, which is great. So the humans module was put into phase 1, yay for us, along with grants. And we have a very aggressive timeline of going live in June of 2025, where we didn't even start really seeing seeing the sandbox until last month. Some great highlights of the new system, as we're aware of it so far, is that how in our old system, when you wanted to update your study team members, you could just log a comment or something, and we would, or submit the modification, we'd log a comment back saying it's effective immediately. Basically, you're good to go. New system, our current system, we have to do a whole review, and it takes longer. In the future system, Insight, it's also going to be more administrative. So you can say, I want to add or remove these people. It checks city automatically, and then you're good to go. So that's going to be a big time saver for the IRB staff and for you. Also, that gives us more, kind of gives us back some ability to help you make some changes to the submission. If it's something really administrative that the committee wants, like a typo fix, we won't be necessarily forced to make you do the whole thing and then submit it back from the PI. Again, it'll be integrated with other research administration modules. So like grants will be tied to IRB submissions in a real way instead of just from a text number. And IRB will be able to customize completely our forms and add a lot more guidance, links to our website and things to make it, my understanding about how to communicate with the research world or the researcher world is you can't just do a webinar and expect everyone to remember when they actually do the submission, all the things you said in the webinar or all the things you saw on the website. Have to have that information right at the point where you're doing the activity. And so that's what we're excited about for the new system is being able to have more information and guidance right at the point where you're answering a question in the system instead of having to go elsewhere or use your memory to remember what we want. Yeah, so that was any questions about the new system. Again, we're going to get faculty feedback from our IRB members, from our task force for behavioral research, and then probably make sure we get, I think we haven't fully developed our faculty feedback or research coordinator feedback plan yet. But there's good project managers at OIT and from Insight who are helping make sure everyone stays on timeline and gets the right feedback, hopefully, ultimately. It's just a very tight timeline, so it's all going to happen very quickly.
From what I understand, Rebecca, you guys are almost the first office, right? Going into it.
Me and us and grants. So OSP and IRB are the guinea pigs.
Okay. So what will happen to our IRB projects the way they are right now?
Very great question. We already had this big experience migrating data from our old Huron system to our new Huron system, even though they were the same vendor. It was a full migration. Very challenging, very not fun. Our goal this time, as well as last time, is to do as much of it in automated fashion as possible and not have to have researchers kind of refill in lots of forms, not do manual migration. So I'm hoping, and my fingers are crossed that they'll figure out how to do it well. And we'll have more on that in the future. It's possible there's going to still be some stuff spilled over into an archive like we had when we had to close out our old system. There's just like archive files that never made it into our current system. But we're just going to have to wait and see how good it is. We're going to do our best to make it as automatic as possible in a very short amount of time.
That sounds good. I'm going to open the thing. We have plenty of time for questions, guys. You can unmute. You can, I don't know what the word for showing the video is, but unvideo, unmute, come on and ask Rebecca any questions and have a discussion. We have lots to discuss here.
I saw the questions in advance, one about international research from my friend Jessica. So we do have the webpage, but I can, answer, the regulations for privacy are a big factor in that. And then again, that's one of the areas where it would be, if we're going to have separate kind of specialized teams, having that for international research might be one of them because of how much goes into those studies. And another one about us being slow for the last 9 months from Madeline. And I think some of it is anecdotal, like it's definitely, I would say not across the board that everyone has experienced us being slower than we were before. Going back to what I said earlier about just the luck of the draw in terms of analysts you're assigned, they have different strengths and weaknesses. So we definitely are aware that some of our analysts need more coaching and performance help in terms of being faster, especially now that we are really pretty fully staffed and we don't really have, I think, excuses to be slow. But there's a lot of things that also could help us be faster in terms of those quality of submissions. There's a lot of things that just take a long time to sort through and a frustrating amount of time on everybody's part to sort through and go back and forth about. And I would agree that like anytime you go back and forth with the analyst, it's going to not exponentially, but linearly double or triple the time that it takes to get through the IRB. that's something we're very aware of. And again, why we're trying to improve our templates and guidance so that we don't end up having so much to nitpick or to be like inconsistent across different documents. It's definitely on the researcher's best interest to make sure that they've done a good scrutiny of consistency across the consent form, the protocol, the IRIS Smart form, because that's stuff that gets caught a lot.
Rebecca, Jessica brought up this question
I
that
see.
sometimes we get mixed advice from study to study. Let me ask you a question. Do you have, in the analyst teams, the way you have it organized, do you have team leaders? Like they can go and ask questions too, and can we get, so how do we make sure we,
Escalating things or making sure, yeah. And Jessica's used me for sure in the past to say, hey, what's going on here. We do have team leads. So it's me and Julie Martin as specializes in reliance, but she also manages non-reliance analysts, and she's a generalist in general. She would love to even be able to get rid of reliance at some point and give someone else a turn. And then Shara Karlabach has years and years of experience. Carol Corcoran tends to be more of our social behavioral education research team lead with her specialization of, we used to have specialized teams and she was on the social behavioral team. So, oh, thank you, Lindsay. So any of those are people that you can go to. We're also, I forgot to mention that on our website very shortly and in the signatures, you're going to see book with me links for our analysts so that you can find time to talk face to face with them instead of going back and forth via logged comments or emails as much. We already encourage them to say, hey, if things are getting off track or taking more than one or two emails to get clear, just try to get on the phone with the people. And we do have staff that are on the phone with analysts a lot, or on the phone with researchers a lot, or on Zooms with the researchers a lot. But then there's going to be cases because of our volume where the researchers want to do that and haven't been able to get that on the schedule or get a response on it. So that'll be an
Rebecca,
automated
the
way.
book with me coming online, because I miss that. I miss being able to pick up a phone and call IRB and somebody answer my question. So
Yeah.
will that happen?
Yes, it's going to happen. And actually ORA, I suggested to ORA in general, and we have these like tech tip presentations, and John Doan is going to be doing the next one on book with me, because it's something that I think a lot of ORA in general potentially could benefit from, for us to use more widely. And we think that's probably the best way, in addition to using our listserv. So to get to be with someone, you can obviously in an email to your analyst kind of say, hey, let's set up a time to talk. Can you meet this time? And that's what's happening right now. But we have a listserv where if you don't have a study that has an analyst yet, if it's about a general question, if you email that listserv and say, I'd like to talk to someone, every day someone's managing that listserv, and they're supposed to be, and they have been to our experience, then polling the staff and saying, hey, who's going to reach back out to this person and set up a time to talk? And then that should be happening. And if it isn't happening, I need to know about that. So that's the way to kind of ask a general question right now. You could also go to book with me and you go to a team lead or go to an analyst that you're familiar with who you know has good answers to questions and get on their schedule. But if you have a study specific question, you really need to go to that analyst unless they're on a leave of absence or something, or on a long vacation. So I mean, never hesitate to just say, hey, analyst, I really want to talk to you on the phone. And they should be very willing and enthusiastic about doing that. But again, just calling them cold, it is the trouble, like even for my own phone forwarding to my cell phone, it doesn't work a lot of the time, and I don't know why.
I think that with me will be helpful. Thank you, Rebecca, for moving forward that initiative. Thank you. Any other questions?
I think there's one more about reliance agreements. So this comes up both when there's a new study that we know is going to have multiple sites and is federally funded, and we loop in our reliance team right away, and then they start the process of figuring out who's relying on who and getting those reliance agreements set up. We can initially approve a study if we're the prime, potentially without all those in place yet, but then you'd add those sites as modifications, because they can take a little while, even though most institutions nowadays are on the Smart IRB platform. So it's still needs some kind of like agreement, but it's not a whole negotiated huge reliance agreement because that's already been negotiated. There's other situation that's very common is where you have an ongoing study, but now either someone from Emory has left to go to another institution, or there's a student from another institution that you want to work on your study over the summer. just the addition of new external personnel. That's where you don't just get them a sponsored account and add them as an Emory person and hope for the best. We really need to know that they're a non-Emory person. So you do a modification to add them, tell us what they're going to be doing. We have a kind of a table that you'd fill out in the external study team members section that lays out for us to figure out, are they engaged in human subjects research? That's the key thing. Because if not, if they're doing something on the research, but it's not human subjects research activity, we don't need to even know about them. But if it is, and we need to know what they're doing in order to determine that, then we need to do either an individual investigator agreement if they're not affiliated with another institution, or a reliance agreement with their home institution. So that can take varying amounts of time. You would want to probably decouple that from other modifications. Like if you were going to make an update to your research protocol at the same time, maybe try to do that first and then just tell us about the new external person so we can get it going, but don't do that modification yet because you don't want other things tied up with that, if that makes sense. And if Dr. Ogunya, if you have any specific questions, feel free to.
Yeah, that makes sense. That was what I was talking about, the second option where you have like Grady APPs on your protocol, but it's just secondary data analysis. I've gotten questions from some analysts saying we need a reliance agreement. Some people didn't bring it up, so I kind of get confused. If I'm
Grady shouldn't need a reliance agreement because we have an overarching MOU with them. We do need to have them listed as external people, but if you just say they're Grady personnel, then we should just be able to go with that. It might, one thing actually I don't even know is that does that then implicate, it would be Grady study. So already the ROC is reviewing, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Then the other question is, like, for example, you have a PCORI grant,
Yeah.
and another institution is the prime institution, and Emory is just a site. Do you need a reliance agreement?
PCORI, from my understanding, is not considered federal funding. So we tend to try to only bother with reliance when it's required, or if it's like such an obvious slam dunk because all we're doing is analyzing a little data and everything else is somewhere else. So if it's a multi-site study that's PCORI, we would probably say, okay, we'll do our own review. But if it's federally funded, then we would need to rely on their lead at IRB.
And it doesn't matter if it's a clinical trial or not. So let's say it's a PCORI funded clinical trial, it doesn't matter.
No, it's only industry funded and industry design, like industry design funded sponsored clinical trials go to the commercial IRB, whatever commercial IRB the sponsor uses. Federally funded ones, it doesn't matter if it's a clinical trial or not. It's just based on the funding source.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Oh, Radex. Yes. I'm our buddies over there. Thank you, Chelsea. I appreciate it.
Hey, Rebecca, I want to follow up on Viva's question earlier about the adding funding to something that includes, or bringing in new funding that includes the use of previously collected human specimens. And if I understood right, you're saying that there's a rule that someone has interpreted as meaning that every time these samples get used, that the new project has to be scrutinized.
So there's a couple caveats. One is, if you have a bank, some specimens from one research study that you're still actively using, or they're stored, and another team wants to use them and you give them to them without any identifiers attached and you're not collaborating with them, then they could be doing not human subjects. We would just want to make sure that the consent for the primary study allowed for sharing for future research. So that would be one scenario where no other scrutiny would be needed if it's totally de-identified and whoever's using it can't link back to identifiers. But oftentimes there's going to be some kind of collaboration from the people on the primary study with whoever's doing the additional analyses. So that would make it human subjects research and need IRB review. And if those new analyses are not already just continuation of what's in the primary protocol, or if there's, sometimes new considerations come in that the researcher might not have at top of mind, like it introduces using those samples to develop a new assay that might be actually an FDA regulated medical device without, people realizing it. You don't want that added to the primary study because it introduces a whole other set of regulations. Or if it introduces federal funding where there wasn't any before, that's also going to introduce a whole other level of federal regulations to that primary study. So there's a lot of reasons why the default answer is just for a new set of analyses on existing data collected or specimens collected for a primary study, a separate submission is the default. But again, there are exceptions. So we're not doing it just to be difficult. Not that you were implying that, but
I'm just
we
trying to
definitely
figure
want
out.
to try to
Yeah.
ease things where possible, but we have to admit that a lot of times it's just going to need that additional new submission. After that, you don't have to do continuing reviews on it. It's very rare to have amendments, so it's kind of like one and done. But that's the default, yeah.
So
Sorry, go ahead,
I
Dan.
understood what you were saying. Would
Yeah.
it be an option for some people in some situations to simply, because you started saying that when it trips the switch when one of your collaborators that wasn't on the original collecting IRB may have access to identifying information. Was that correct?
Or where you are collaborating with this other new person and you have access to identifiers because you're on the primary study. Like if you're on the initial study and then another colleague wants to do some analyses that are your samples would be useful for, and you want to collaborate and co-author with them, then because you have that access to those identifiers, then their study becomes human subjects research if you're collaborating with them. If you weren't
That I don't
collaborating,
understand. If I have access to it and I've already sworn that I'm not going to disclose that,
mm-hmm.
how does anybody else being involved um, change anything? If I've got a protocol for a biobank that says we've collected these samples, they're for redistribution. It sounds like what you're saying is every time I hand somebody samples and they're going to share the data with me, that I need a whole new IRB protocol.
They would, as the PI, if they're doing especially if it's a biobank, like a biobank tissue repository protocol only is for a tissue repository. So any separate uses of that, the use protocols would be separate submissions, unless they are getting completely de-identified stuff, which is fine, and then they wouldn't need any IRB review. But if the PI of the biobank or the primary study that generated those samples is also collaborating on that use protocol, that's when they would have access to identifiers. So you can't say you're only giving out totally de-identified stuff.
That really is very confusing for me.
And
I,
what Rebecca is trying to say is if the data comes back, say if they gave you data back on CXCL12, now you started correlating CXCL12 with patient variables because you had access to patient variable, right? Then that data got linked to the patient variables because you were the link there. Is that what you're saying, Rebecca, right? You're
And I
saying,
don't probably not understanding, I guess, the specific scenario you're talking about where the data is coming back. Like, if you're like if a lot of repositories are set up so that they can just give out stuff like the Winship Tissue Bank, for example. And then, they can give it out. They have SOPs that say we're going to have no identifiers on it. And that's all good. No one would need their IRB submission for that subsequent use.
Yeah.
Except when, like the PI of the tissue bank wants to collaborate with that other user of the specimens, because the tissue bank PI always will have access to identifiers. So you can't, if they're collaborating scientifically, not just giving out the samples, but collaborating scientifically on that separate protocol, then that separate protocol would need an IRB submission for us as a secondary use protocol.
I still have some questions, but we don't have to keep wasting
that's okay, Dan.
time with this with my confusion.
No, I agree with you. I think what we're going to have to do is, this is really idea generating stuff. These ease of research series. One of the things I think we have to really understand is these translational research studies, which really make the core of our human studies, because we want to understand disease pathogenesis through this patient cohort and these samples which we have. And I am, I think a lot of us have a little bit of a, like, we would like to see how we can interact with IRB here to make it easier for us while maintaining what Rebecca needs to maintain at her level, which is proper oversight. So maybe we'll make a committee for this translational research projects, Rebecca, and come to you with some back and forth ideas, because there could be maybe some room for some micro changes which can help us.
Yeah, I will keep a really
within
open
your
mind.
protocol.
I can say that this has come up throughout my 20 years of being here, and this is kind of where we landed, but I will totally keep an open mind because it is something that comes up forever. I mean, it's always going to be something that researchers, especially when they're coming from another institution or they're new researchers, are surprised by. So I will I will be happy to contribute to something like that.
And to be respectful for other IRBs, like, I come from Michigan. I'm sure that IRB is also an extremely diligent IRB, which is not letting me do stuff which wasn't right. Right. So I think it's just the way we look at it. So I will definitely come back to you and make a translational research committee to come talk to you about that. Anybody who wants to volunteer for that IRB translational research committee, which I just named, please email me and we will all get on it. I know, Amy, you said you want to be on it, and Dan, anybody else, please do. Okay, thank you
Okay.
so much. And there are some thank yous to you, Rebecca. We know we are extremely, extremely thankful to you. Without you, we cannot do any research. We know that. And we know this oversight is extremely important. I know we give you a hard time. That's like what we do with IRB, but we're sorry for that. We really appreciate you.
No,
And
it's
thank you
important.
so much for coming. And there are some thank yous to you in the messages as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your collaboration immensely.
Thank you, everyone, for joining. And thanks again to Rebecca for her time.
Bye.